When my husband's gold-digging girlfriend threw me a divorce party to celebrate taking my billionaire husband, she had no idea what was coming. See, there was one tiny detail about our family fortune that nobody knew except me. And honey, the look on her face when I revealed it, priceless. Before we dive into this wild story, hit that like button if you've ever dealt with someone who thought they could just waltz in and take what's yours. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one because the twist at the end will blow your mind. You know that feeling when everything in your life seems perfect on the outside, but something deep in your gut tells you it's all about to fall apart. That's exactly where I was 4 years into my marriage with Daniel. From the outside looking in, we had it all. The penthouse overlooking the city, the vacation homes in Martha's Vineyard in Aspen, the luxury cars, the private jets. Daniel was this successful businessman that everyone admired. And I was the successful black woman who seemed to have it all figured out. But let me tell you something about perfection. It's usually hiding some pretty ugly truths underneath. I should have seen the signs earlier, but when you're busy running your own consulting firm and managing multiple business ventures, you tend to give your husband the benefit of the doubt. The late nights at the office became more frequent. The business trips that seemed to stretch longer than necessary. The way he'd suddenly become protective of his phone, always keeping it face down, always stepping out to take certain calls. The first real red flag came on a Tuesday evening in March. I was in our home office going through some contracts when Daniel walked in and I caught a whiff of perfume that definitely wasn't mine. Now, I'm not the type to jump to conclusions, but I'm also not naive. When you've built your own empire from nothing, you learn to trust your instincts. And my instincts were screaming that something was wrong. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention. There were the unexplained charges on our credit card statements, expensive dinners at restaurants we'd never been to together, jewelry purchases that never made it home to me, hotel charges in the city when Daniel was supposedly working late at the office. The evidence was piling up, but I wasn't ready to confront it yet. Sometimes you need time to process betrayal before you can face it head-on. Then I met her. Brittany, 25 years old, bleach blonde hair, fake everything, and an Instagram account full of designer bags and exotic locations. She was everything I wasn't. Young, carefree, and apparently very interested in married men with money. I first saw her at one of Daniel's company events, hanging around the bar, making eyes at my husband when she thought I wasn't looking. The audacity was almost impressive. What really got me was how bold she became once she realized Daniel wasn't going to hide her anymore. This girl started showing up places where she knew I'd be. The country club, charity galas, even my favorite restaurant downtown, always dressed to the nines, always making sure I could see her laughing and touching my husband like I didn't exist. The breaking point came when I found a text message on Daniel's phone that he'd left on our kitchen counter. It was from her talking about how excited she was for their weekend getaway and how she couldn't wait to be the new MS in his life. The disrespect was staggering. But what hurt more was seeing Daniel's response, telling her how much happier he was with her and how he was ready to start his new life. That night, Daniel came home acting like nothing had happened. We ate dinner together, watched Netflix, went through all the motions of a normal marriage. But inside, I was done. The man I'd trusted with my heart, my life, my future, had been planning to throw it all away for some Instagram influencer who saw dollar signs instead of a human being. The divorce papers arrived 3 weeks later. Daniel's lawyer had crafted this aggressive strategy demanding half of everything. The houses, the businesses, the investment portfolios, everything we'd built together. Or so he thought. The paperwork painted me as some kind of gold digger who had been living off Daniel's success, which would have been hilarious if it wasn't so insulting. But here's where the story gets really interesting. While Daniel and his legal team were busy calculating how they were going to split up his fortune, and while Brittany was already planning her new life as a billionaire's wife, I was quietly having meetings with my own lawyers. Not the family lawyers that Daniel knew about, but the estate attorneys who had been handling my family's affairs for decades. You see, there was something about our finances that Daniel never fully understood. Something I had never felt the need to explain in detail because, well, we were married and in love, and I trusted him. The truth was, most of what Daniel thought was his money had actually come from my family's trust fund. My grandmother had been one of the first black women to own property in our city back in the 1940s. She'd built a real estate empire that my family had been growing for generations. When Daniel and I got married, I'd made him a beneficiary of the trust, which gave him access to use the funds for our lifestyle and business ventures. To him, it probably looked like we were both contributing equally to our wealth. But legally, technically, and actually, the money belonged to my bloodline. The houses were purchased through the trust. The investment accounts were funded by the trust. Even Daniel's precious business ventures had been backed by my family's money. The weeks leading up to our court date were surreal. Daniel moved out and into some fancy downtown apartment with Brittany. And apparently, they were having the time of their lives spending money they thought was about to be theirs. I heard through mutual friends that Brittany had even thrown herself a divorce party. Can you believe that? This woman was literally celebrating the end of my marriage. Like it was some kind of victory. Meanwhile, I was working with my legal team to compile 4 years' worth of financial documents, trust records, and family estate papers. It was tedious work, but necessary. Every property deed, every investment statement, every business license had to be reviewed to show the clear paper trail of where our wealth actually came from. The day of the divorce hearing finally arrived, and I'll never forget walking into that courthouse. Daniel was there with his expensive legal team, looking confident and smug. Brittany was sitting in the gallery wearing some ridiculously expensive outfit, probably paid for with what she thought was about to be her money. She kept smirking at me like she'd already won some prize. Daniel's lawyer went first, presenting their case for why he deserved half of everything. They talked about his business acumen, his contributions to our lifestyle, his role as the primary breadwinner. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. Really, they painted this picture of Daniel as this self-made success story who had generously shared his wealth with his wife and now deserved his fair share in the divorce. When it was my lawyer's turn to speak, the energy in the room shifted completely. She started by thanking the court for their time, and then she dropped the first bomb. Your Honor, my client's husband, was never the source of the wealth he's claiming rights to. The defendant was in fact a beneficiary of my client's family trust, which has been the true source of their marital assets. I watched Daniel's face change from confident to confused to concerned in about 30 seconds. His lawyer started shuffling through papers, clearly caught off guard. Brittany stopped smirking and started paying attention for the first time. My lawyer continued, the properties, the business investments, the luxury assets, all of this was funded through the plaintiff's family trust, established by her grandmother in 1943 and continuously managed by her family for over 80 years. Upon dissolution of this marriage, all trust-funded assets revert to the beneficiaries of the trust, which does not include the defendant. The courtroom went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Daniel was staring at his lawyer like he was waiting for some kind of magical rebuttal, but there wasn't one. The paperwork was all there, clear as day, property deeds in the trust's name, investment accounts linked to the family estate, business loans backed by trust collateral. Then my lawyer delivered the final blow. Furthermore, Your Honor, we have documentation showing that the defendant was made aware of these arrangements at the time of marriage through the prenuptial agreement, which clearly stated that family trust assets would remain separate property. That's when Daniel's face went completely white. He remembered signing that prenup, probably thinking it was just some standard paperwork that rich families make you sign. He never bothered to read the fine print or ask questions about what it really meant. The judge reviewed our documentation for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. When she finally looked up, she addressed Daniel's legal team directly. Based on the evidence presented, it's clear that the majority of assets in question belong to the plaintiff's family trust and are therefore not subject to division in this divorce. The defendant is entitled to half of any assets that can be proven to have been acquired through his individual earnings during the marriage. Do you know what Daniel had earned individually during our 4-year marriage? Almost nothing. His businesses had all been funded by my family's money. His salary from his consulting work barely covered his personal expenses. When everything was calculated, he was entitled to about $50,000 and his personal belongings. The look on Brittany's face was priceless. This woman had been planning her billionaire lifestyle, probably already picking out which designer bags she was going to buy first. Instead, She was sitting there watching her meal ticket get reduced to pocket change. I actually felt sorry for Daniel in that moment because I could see the realization hitting him that he was about to lose everything, not just me, but the entire life he'd gotten comfortable living. After the hearing, I walked out of that courthouse, a free woman with my dignity, my wealth, and my future intact. Daniel walked out with a check for $50,000 and a girlfriend who was already looking at her phone, probably swiping through dating apps to find her next target. The best part, I found out later that Brittany broke up with Daniel before they even made it back to his apartment. Apparently, being with a broke middle-aged man wasn't as appealing as being with a billionaire. Who would have thought? But here's the thing I haven't told you yet. The real twist in this whole story. I had known about Daniel's affair for months before he filed for divorce. I'd hired a private investigator, documented everything, and had been working with my lawyers to protect my assets long before Daniel even realized there was going to be a divorce. Those months when I seemed like I was just sitting back and taking the betrayal, I was actually making strategic moves. I transferred certain personal assets back into the trust. I updated beneficiary information on accounts that had become mixed during our marriage. I even started new business ventures that would be completely separate from anything Daniel had been involved in. By the time Daniel filed for divorce, I was 10 steps ahead of him. While he was planning his new life with Brittany, I was securing mine. Today, I'm running my businesses better than ever. I bought a new house in the hills that Daniel will never set foot in. I travel when I want to, buy what I want to, and live my life on my own terms. Daniel, from what I hear, is struggling to pay rent on a one-bedroom apartment and working for someone else's company again. And Brittany, last I checked her Instagram, she's back to posting thirsty photos with captions about finding her king. Some women never learn. The moral of this story isn't just about protecting your assets or reading the fine print on legal documents, though those things are important. It's about knowing your worth and never letting anyone make you feel like you're less than you are. Daniel thought he could trade me in for a newer model and keep the lifestyle I had provided. He thought wrong. My grandmother used to tell me, "Baby, never let anyone mistake your kindness for weakness. And never let anyone think they built something that your family's blood, sweat, and tears paid for." I forgot that lesson for a while, but I remembered it when it mattered most. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just letting people face the consequences of their own choices. Daniel chose to throw away a real partnership for a fantasy with someone who only wanted him for his money. When that money turned out to be mine all along, reality came crashing down pretty quickly. If this story taught you anything, let it be this. Never underestimate a woman who's been building her own empire. Drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in my situation. And if you enjoyed this story of sweet justice, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell because I've got plenty more stories where karma comes knocking. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming.